Hello there and welcome to Igrys, Planet of Magic, and also the latest exotic destination in the Laurence plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers series. A new planet means a new leader, and so Tristan will be taking the reins here, directing the progress on this planet, at least from a high level point of view, because he is of course still at the whims and vagaries of the rest of us for exactly how the builds come together. So let's take a look at what this planet can offer us. Igrys is an interesting planet. It has a number of different resources available on it. There are oceans of light oil, which can be pulled out by pump jack, just as you'd sort of expect, and as we've seen before, similarly on Fulgora. And it also has some absolutely enormous patches of hard stones. This one, as you can see, is 10.6 billion if you combine the two on either side of the lake here. But this is Igrys stone as opposed to normal stone. And if we zoom on in it, you can tell what the main difference is. And that is that it has a mining time of 2,000%. This is hard stone. And that means it takes, well, as it says, 20 times as long to dig it up. And so in an attempt to get round that and still get a decent supply of stone flowing in, because stone is a valuable resource on this planet, I've placed down an enormous number of these big mining drills that we brought over from Vulcanus, and I dread to imagine how long it would take to mine this stuff up if we didn't have the big ones. And so these should be able to pull a large amount out, and so far I've finished 3 stripes going all the way over to here, out of, well, potentially 6 stripes eventually, but we don't need that much stone yet. Tristan has asked me to produce loads of stone and then supply it out on 6 output belts over here, so eventually we'll expand this out as far as is necessary, but at the moment this is keeping us going quite happily. Because power is a bit of an issue on this planet, I've been putting efficiency modules in the mining drills, and because digging the stone up isn't a bit of a pain, I've also been putting some speed modules in. So as you can see over here, we're going at a plus 30% mining speed, so that brings it up to 3.25, while still bringing the power consumption down by 60%. So between those, we're saving quite a lot of power. It's not quite down to the absolute minimum, but we are saving a lot of power while still getting a decent speed boost as well. The other resource on this planet comes from down here, where we've got the Igrys magic fluid, and this is pumped out of the ground not by a pump jack, but by a magic pump jack, which is sort of similar, but it requires a fuel. It requires water to be provided as a fuel source, and getting water on this planet is slightly tricky because, as you saw, the lakes on this planet are full of light oil instead of water. Fortunately, there is another resource available. There are small patches of Igrys water which are pumped out by normal pump jacks and then can be used in much the same way that you'd use oil on Norvis or other pump jack related products on other planets. This is relatively straightforward, but it does give me a minor concern that eventually we're going to run out of water over here and have to find it from somewhere else. And there'll probably be other patches available around the planet. We found another one over here, for example, but it's still a little bit of a concern. And that is it as far as raw materials go. Well, it's not quite, because there is additionally the rocks that lie around on Igrys, and they give you a certain amount of stone, which is nice. And then they also give you some of these gems, and we'll be getting back to those later because those are a relevant and an important thing on this planet. So I say that's it for raw resources on this planet. I'm being slightly inaccurate there because there's one other thing you can obtain without needing to bring it in from anywhere else, and that is copper. Rather bizarrely, on this planet you can make one of these copper plate machines which pull in air and then, at least during the night, can turn it into copper plates. And that's very strange for a number of reasons. One is that there's clearly so much copper available in the atmosphere that these machines are able to sort of distill it out and turn it into solid plates of copper, which we can then pass out to the rest of the planet. But the other part is that, as I say, they only work at night. So as you can see, it's getting dark now. You can see night pulling in around here, and the lights are all coming on. And these machines have now gone to an output full, so they've gone yellow because we've got a lot of copper. We've stockpiled loads of it because this is plenty at the moment for the state we're at. But during the day, these machines shut down completely, and we get red blobs on them, even though they don't require any input, because apparently there's some weird thing in the magic field. I don't know. It's a magic planet, so things are going to be a bit weird, and they're only going to work at night. The problem with that is that all of our power generation is done through solar. Tristan's put down an enormous array of solar panels over here, which is generating a good amount of electricity, keeping things generally happy, and a number of accumulators as well to keep things running overnight. However, these things have rather a high draw overnight when they're running, and so when Mark was building up the copper production facility over here, he's put in a load of extra accumulators and a switch system over here so that these will only be charged up when this one on the outside is completely full. So at the moment you can see the switch is open because this accumulator is discharged down to about 85%, but once it gets backed up to 100%, then this switch will close and we'll be able to recharge the like that. We'll be able to recharge the accumulators on this side, get them back up to full power, and that's happened nice and quickly, which is good. And this means that we're all now ready for tonight, when these machines will potentially kick back in again, and we'll start using loads of the power from these accumulators. That's then brought out along this belt up here, where we're putting it into a buffer system because, well, if it's only producing during the night, then we're going to need some of it during the day as well. So that gets put into some chests here, and then unloaded onto another belt, which can be then passed up, brought round, and fed into the rest of the factory. The next stage then uses some of the stone that's being pulled up out of my mine, and Mike has built up some stone brick production. This is very, very standard. The hard stone works in exactly the same way as normal stone, so you can just cook it down into bricks. So we've got an array of electric furnaces here, giving us a nice belt of bricks coming out. That's then fed over to the next stage, where I put in some conductive brick production, and as far as I can tell, that's basically you take a brick, you wrap it in copper, and you pass it out and you call it a conductive brick. Great. It seems like a slightly odd thing to be making, but I guess it makes the copper a little bit bigger without having to spend that much on the copper. I don't know, but copper's so cheap on this planet that a solid brick of copper would probably be more efficient. Anyway, we're making those and then passing them on along a bus to the next stage. Tristan did some thinking about the numbers that were going to be required and then asked me to turn 3 full stone belts into magic glass. Now, magic glass is an Igrian recipe. It's a very specific one that happens, that's only used over here as far as I'm aware, but allows you to do all of the sort of the local recipes. And as you can see over here, quite a lot of the stone is spat out again as well. So if we look at the recipe, we can see it's taking in a huge quantity of stone and then spitting out a fairly large quantity of magic glass and also some stone as well. So that needs to then be fed back round through here, and we need to make sure that it gets reused as a priority. So I've got the usual priority things on the splitters over here, but this did still manage to jam up before I came over and put in some additional belts, because I originally only had it going off to this side. I thought, okay, well, it's only giving back a sixth of it. That should be fine. So I'll pump it all back round through here and down this side, and these machines can use it. But that managed to jam up, so I've now got it feeding out to both sides, down here and down here. And I was going to say, so far that seems to be okay, but actually we've jammed up again now. We've got, the stone isn't getting through because the stone's not being used by the machines, because the machines can't unload, because the stone can't go through, and we've now run out of magic glass over here. So there's some problems in this. It looks like the amount of stone that's being buffered in here is insufficient, so maybe I need some longer belts that run out and back again to hold a bit more of it, or I could put some into chests when required, but that doesn't feel ideal. And so yeah, this isn't great. I'm going to have to find a way of balancing this so we don't get these sort of problems, and and there's enough buffer for this stone to flow out and go back into the machines in order to try and make more glass as well. This reminds me a bit of the problems we're having over on Maluna back when we first got started with the tree growing, because when tree growing finishes, it dumps out 10,000 oxygen and then pulls in 10,000 carbon dioxide. So you need somewhere for that oxygen to go, otherwise the system all jams up because it's so full of oxygen on the way out. And we fix that by putting in a row of these tanks over here to store the oxygen. There's loads and loads of space in here, so even when lots of these machines finish basically at the same time, they can all dump their 10,000 oxygen each, and it'll all go into these tanks over here, and then can gradually be converted back into carbon dioxide by the carbon burning machines over here. And that worked really well over on this planet because fluids can be just dumped straight into tanks very, very quickly and very, very easily. It's a bit harder with solids though, because, well, we don't have loaders, and therefore we can't load at the full speed that it's coming out on a belt. What we could perhaps do is put in a system like this, where it's going into chests and we've got multiple inserters filling up the belt and unloading it again. It feels a bit undesirable to have to make something this big in order to get round the problem. However, we do need to get round the problem, so I think we may end up having to do that. There is plenty of space available around this build though. There's lots of room over here to put in a load of chests and some stockpiles, and less room over here, but maybe we could squeeze it in up here, or run it all the way over here and then feed it back in on these belts, or something like that. There are a number of possibilities at this point that we could use to try and get an extra buffer in on the stone supply as it comes out and needs to be recycled. But these large number recipes are causing some difficulties here. That magic glass and then some of Mark's copper gets brought in over here, where we're using it for the alternative recipe for red science. Now, this recipe is probably no better than doing it the traditional Norvian way, which requires 1 copper plate and 1 iron gear wheel. Now, okay, this one requires 3 copper plates, but in a way that's cheaper because the copper's free, kind of. But then it also requires 2 magic glass, which takes 5 pieces of stone each, so 10 pieces of stone. But that stone is 20 times harder to dig up, so does that make it equivalent to 200 pieces of stone? But then there's so much stone in that patch that stone is quite cheap. I don't know. I suspect this is probably not going to be a place we would want to produce red science for shipping away. However, it's cheap and easy enough that we might as well produce the red science that we're going to need on this planet anyway. For now, that red science is just being fed out down a belt over here, and we're just putting it onto a belt because we aren't quite ready to use it yet. The next resource we produced was something that Mike was in charge of, and this is another weird one for this planet, and this is called cermet. And so over here we're feeding in stone bricks from the system down here that Mike put together. Those are brought up and then they're mixed with light oil in a chemical plant to produce cermet. But cermet spoils very quickly in only 2 minutes and turns into steel. So this gives us a weird roundabout way of producing steel on this planet, which is nice, I suppose. So we can get steel out here, which is very useful actually, because we do want to build a few things out of steel. And that has meant that Mike has been able to set up the system down here, and we've essentially got a flow of steel running down this belt over here. Now, as I said, it's only a 2-minute spoil time, so we don't expect the Cermet to really make it very far. However, I have a feeling that we're going to require Cermet in a different form later on, so that's going to be something interesting for Mike to have a look into. He's then also taking in a supply of copper to make copper cable, and then a supply of magic glass to make the green circuits, because Igrys comes with its own alternative recipes for making lots of things, including green circuits, which as you can see here are now being made out of, well, copper and glass, which, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense. I could see that working probably better than making a circuit board out of iron and copper, to be honest. So yes, we've then got green circuits flowing down here, and because we're going to need red circuits and eventually blue circuits for making rockets, we've had to start making the other ingredients for that as well, and it turns out you can make plastic out of light oil and magic glass. So this is another weird Ygrian recipe, because there isn't any coal available on this planet, so we've been given an alternative recipe where we're able to use some of the magic glass and the oil in order to make plastic. Let's not ask about how the chemistry of that works. It is apparently a planet of magic. And I'm sure that's not just a cop-out. And so yes, those resources down here can easily now be turned into red circuits using the normal recipe, and then we'll be able to make some blue circuits, because there's another weird recipe for making sulfuric acid on this planet, which I shall talk about in a later video. The next step on this planet involves that magic fluid we were talking about earlier, which is pumped up out of the magic pump jacks over here and then brought down quite a long pipe and over to this area where we're off playing with crystals. And the magic fluid can be distilled down in these chemical plants and turned into the 3 types of crystals, green, blue and red, or 1, 2 and 3 as they appear to be called here. Although that does require a supply of conductive bricks, so that's why we've got quite so many of those being made. We can ship them round, and magic stuff happens, and we get a supply of the crystals coming out. We've also got a few spares that we've acquired by digging up some of the rocks, and so we've used a series of blue chests down here to pull them in and then drop them onto belts. We then need to start making the magic tesseracts, and that's these silvery diamond things over here. And those are interesting because there are 3 different ways to make them using a green, blue or red crystal recipe. And the specific difference between these recipes, they all require 2 of each of the crystals. However, each one requires a different crystal to have been made rich and so upgraded to the improved version of it. And so we looked at the recipes for the rich magic crystals, and we discovered that you can make the green ones by mixing a normal magic crystal with a load of magic glass. You can make a blue one by mixing the blue crystal with some conductive bricks, or you can make the red ones by mixing red crystal with some cermite. And we don't have any cermite at the moment, so we haven't done that one. We've got plenty of conductive bricks, and that's made out of really quite cheap ingredients, and we've got a decent quantity of magic glass as well. So we decided that the best way to do this, especially as we already had the conductive bricks over here, was just to grab those in along with the blue crystals and make the improved blue crystals, and then just use the blue recipe over here for making the tesseracts. There were some people in chat saying that they thought you needed to make all of them in order to keep the system balanced, because it wasn't a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, and you need to have all the different ones in order to keep things balanced. But having done a little bit of checking, that seems to not be the case. The magic fluid processing produces 1 of each type of crystal, and there's no probabilities in there, it just straight up produces 1 of each. The improving of the crystals turns 1 magic crystal into 1 rich magic crystal, so there's no losses in there. And then the tesseract recipe takes in 2 of each. So again, it's 1-to-1-to-1 all the way through. You use everything in the same ratios, so there's no need to mess around with the others, at least not yet. We will need to later, we've discovered, but at the moment we can just straight up make them using 1 type of recipe. And so we've done that because we're a little bit lazy and we'd like to see what improvements we're going to get from having these before we decide to build out a massive system that works with everything. I do feel it's a little bit of a shame that it's designed like this. It would be quite nice if there was something that would throw them out of balance and therefore require you to use all the different recipes, but never mind, this is still fine. And then those tesseracts and a few other things besides can be fed into making the mineral science pack, and this is the science pack for this planet, so we're doing quite well on making progress towards that. Mike is still working towards the production science pack. That's why he's working on red circuits at the moment, and we're going to take, even if we're going to steal some of those for blue circuits as well, or maybe we'll bring blue circuits in from Lignumis, as I was discussing in the last video. But this is as far as we've got so far, but we are, as I say, very, very nearly there. And so that's going to allow us to start making the mineral science packs, shipping those back over to Norvis where we can then do some research and start unlocking some exciting new toys. building all of this has required a certain quantity of other resources to be available. So Tristan started us bringing in iron plates from space, as you can see there, and that's allowed us to start making lots and lots of the things around here that we're going to need, especially once we've got the copper and the steel and so on available and working. So we've got a simple bot mall running over here. We don't need all that much stuff, so it's not a particularly large one, but that's allowing us to make things like repair packs and solar panels and copper machines and apparently stone furnaces for some reason. I'm not quite sure why we need those, but apparently we do. Oh, they're needed for the copper machines, and a supply of pipes for bringing the magic fluid around and that sort of thing. So we've got a few resources down here, and also possibly more significantly over here, Sophia has been very busy, and this is the lignumus gift that keeps on giving. So he's had to start producing wood over here using the Malunan recipe, where you use these sealed greenhouses for growing wood, where you bring in the carbon dioxide and you bring in water, and it spits out trees or wood depending on what your particular greenhouses are doing. And now it looks like here he's produced a huge number of trees. Something's gone a bit funny here. Oh, I think this is because one of my mods updated. So let's ignore this. Let's just pretend this belt is full of wood. So down here, yes, we've got a load of wood coming through here, and that can then be made into lumber, to be made into gears, and more lumber and more gears, in order to allow us to make the basic belts over here. And then those belts can then be taken to wherever in order to be upgraded to more modern belts as and when required. And that's going to require a steady stream of iron coming in from space as well, because that's what goes into the more effective belts. However, I think most of these blue belts that we brought in were all made on Norvis and then brought over in the spaceship, because that way it allows a little bit more sanity. So this system will be required sooner or later, I suspect, but at the moment is not quite so vital. An interesting twist over here, though, is that because we don't have coal on this planet or any form of carbon, we've been producing the carbon dioxide by taking light oil, turning it into solid fuel, which can then be passed down here and burned with the oxygen that's coming back from the greenhouses in order to make the carbon dioxide, which is then pumped out and goes into the greenhouses over here. So that's a little bit different from other planets, and we're also using that solid fuel to power all of the lumber mills over here as well. So yes, it's a little bit different, but that is quite interesting. I like it when things are a little bit different like this, because it means each planet has its own slightly different feel. These oceans of light oil are also going to make the rocket fuel very easy to make when we need it for making rockets. So I'm not too worried about that. And the low density structures that we're going to need will obviously easily be made from the plastic, the steel, and the copper that we already have coming out of all these machines. So again, no worries there. I think there's going to be some additional complications that we'll find in a little while once we start doing some of the mineral researches and we start to need a few more resources for making the special toys that you get on this planet. But the actual science pack hasn't been too much of a challenge, and that does seem to be a recurring theme actually. We're able to make the science packs fairly easily. It's just all the rest of the infrastructure that goes around them that makes things a bit more complicated. The other thing that's had a bit of a tweak is the spaceship that flies out to Igrys, the Dynamic Storyteller's incredible conveyance. And this has now been programmed to request some ammunition from Norvis when it's over there, because it's taking too long to fill itself back up to the 1,400 it requires before it leaves, just using the resources in Norvis orbit. And so that means Tristan's had to do some minor modifications over here, where as you can see we've got an inserter that unloads ammunition from the central hub onto this belt along here, where we have an inserter that will put it from here onto the belt to take it round to the turrets that require it. As part of these modifications, he's also put in a system that allows, yes, here we go, this inserter to grab iron plates off the belt over here and then load up the central hub until it's got 200 in it. And that's how we're dropping the iron down onto Igrys that you saw earlier. We don't need very large quantities down there, because it's just for a small amount of building pipes in order to make some infrastructure, but we do need to have a little bit, and there's no other way that we're aware of to produce iron on Igrys, and it's nice to have the planets being a little bit more self-sufficient, being able to produce their own pipes and their own belts and so on, rather than having to rely on bringing everything over from Norvis. And so that brings us to the end of the episode. We've dug up some stone, we've produced some copper from nowhere, we've made it into bricks and sparky bricks, and we've made magic glass and weird cermet that turns into steel, and then we've started making some crystal things over here as well, which we're going to start doing more weird investigations with later. And we'll take a look into that after the next stream. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, and you're watching on mobile, please use the YouTube's new hype feature to throw some extra appreciation this way, if you've got any of your free hypes left for this week. I'm trying to investigate whether that new feature will give me a significant boost, and it seems to have helped a little bit with the previous video last week. So, if we get a load more hypes on this one, that would help fantastically. And also, please subscribe as well, because that also helps to boost the channel nicely. These videos will be coming out every Thursday and Friday, so you don't want to miss any of those, and we'll be continuing to stream Planetary Pioneers every Monday at 7:30 PM UK time. If you want to play it yourself, then there's a Planetary Pioneers mod available through the Factorio mod portal, so download that one, stick in the seed 11111 if you want to play in the same universe that we're playing in and see the planets exactly the same. And of course mess around with the quality of life mods if you want to tweak things a little bit from there yourself. I'll also be back on Wednesday when I should be playing some more Foundry. I'm playing around with assembly lines at the moment, which is interesting. It allows me to make much bigger robots with what are functionally much bigger machines, and that's quite interesting and quite exciting, and one of the nice things about the way the game scales. And I think that's everything that's going to be coming up over the next week or so, so please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on any of it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.